Welcome everyone. Yes, welcome to today's psychological safety webinar with myself, Tony, and Joe, my business partner. Both from People Unboxed, as you probably know, you've probably seen us before, and if not, there's a big clue on the slide anyway. We are excited to take you through what we think is a very important subject, and we'll explain why very shortly. Just a few bits of housekeeping first off. It'll only be myself, because it's a webinar style, it'll only be myself and Joe that you'll see on the screen. I mean, feel free to turn your cameras on, but you don't need to. Certainly the audios will keep off, we'll keep everyone muted. It will just be us doing the speaking. So if you do want to get involved, and we'd love you to, please do use the chat function on the bottom right of your screen. Normally is where you'll find it. Or you can use the emoji. So you can go to the little face there and the reactions and share an emoji. And just to call out that the session is being recorded for people that can't attend the live session. So hopefully everyone's okay with that. And yeah, as Joe's just put in the chat there, give us a hello. Hopefully you can see it. And actually, let's all test our chat function, because it is Joe's birthday today. So we've made her work. So everyone should probably tell her happy birthday on the chat, and that way we can test it is working. So there you go. We can see it all coming through. Good stuff.
And you might be able to tell by my face, I did not know Tony was going to say that.
I didn't know. She didn't. Yeah, she didn't know. So yes, so we've made her work anyway, because she thinks this is such an important subject. She was desperate to come on and tell you all about psychological safety. So yes, that's what we're going to be covering. So let's move on to the next slide, please, Joe. And we're going to just a couple of tips. And just very briefly, please do get involved. That's the main thing. Have fun with it. Ask questions. If I don't say anything that makes sense, then it won't be the first time. Please do ask, and I'm sure Joe will say the same. It's a safe space to ask questions. So please do ask if you are not sure about anything, or if you want to know how you can apply this stuff. That's the main thing. So please do get involved throughout the session. So what are we going to be covering? Well, we're going to be looking at obviously what psychological safety is and why it is so important. And I'll let Joe move on the slide. Yes, why psychological safety? Why is it so important? Why does it make such a difference, and what is it? We'll cover that first off. And then the vast majority of the session will focus around 4 key elements or stages of psychological safety. So there are 4 key areas that really you can make a massive difference in. So we're going to spend most of our time there. And then there's just a little technique at the end that Joe's going to take you through called FACE as well. That's going to sort of a value add, if you like, about creating a culture of psychological safety as well. So that's what we're going to be covering. I'll just give you 1 minute, though, in the chat, or a couple of minutes. What is it that you would like to get from today? I mean, I don't know how much people know about this topic already. So is it just to get a basic understanding of what it's all about? Are there certain specifics you'd like to know? Please do share in the chat. What is it you're hoping to get from today's session? So to know more, yeah, okay. So just to know more about, yeah. And do you know what? If that's fine, if that's all it is, if it's a general, increase awareness of this topic, absolutely fine. Yeah, basic understanding. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, we just want to. It'd be good to get an idea of what it is you're trying to get. So to better support yourself and your team, and that's a really important thing. Actually, is that there are 2 elements to this. It's how can I feel more psychologically safe, and how can I create it for my team? Great. Yeah, how to create the safe space. Yeah, never attended. That's interesting, actually, from Sean there. Not attended any training on this subject, and I guess it is a fairly new concept. And so, training, yes, a few years now, but it's not one of the more traditional training subjects, probably. So, yeah, great. Yes, thank you, Gina. Another great shout. How can we build that into our leadership programs? And I see this personally. I see this as a topic that isn't just a standalone topic. This is something that if you're creating leadership programs, development programs for your teams, this is something that needs to be weaved in across all of that. It's not a standalone subject like, I don't know, presentation skills or delegating. This is something that needs to be weaved in throughout. Yeah, the elements, Vina, yeah, absolutely. We're going to cover those 4 key elements, as I mentioned. Strategies, yes, we're going to give you some tips along the way for supporting people. How does it apply to my world of helping organizations land change? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, let's have a think about how we can cover that as we go through. and how to apply. Great. Okay, so I think we've got a decent understanding, but please do fire off anything in the chat as we go through the different topics. Please do, if there's something specific you want to ask that will help you in your role use this stuff, then please do call it out as we go through. So Joe, I'll let you crack on with what psychological safety is all about.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you everyone for the very lovely happy birthday messages in the chat there. And just a quick note as well, make sure you're sending your messages to everyone so that everyone can see the wonderful ideas that we're sharing in the chat as we go through this session. So yeah, let's kick off. What is psychological safety? And actually, I'm going to throw the question over to you folks first. So again, jump on the chat. What do you understand psychological safety to be at this point in time? And of course, we'll bring you up to speed as we go through. But what do we understand currently psychological safety to be? Some ideas on the room chat there. Yeah, being able to be oneself. Yeah, I like it, Debbie. Promoting good mental health, environment where people feel comfortable to speak up, definitely. Team members are safe to share their ideas, definitely. Still got people coming in, let me just let them in. Having the organisation culture to be open, honest and rely on each other. Yeah. Trust. Authentic you, voice at work, collaboration. Yes, Gina. Safe space for risk taking. Yeah, I like that, Kate. Allowing people to be themselves, where everyone feels comfortable to be their authentic selves. Yeah, and that authenticity piece has come up a couple of times. Definitely agree with that one. Okay, so let's have a look at what the definition of psychological safety is. So you can see the definition on the screen there, and it says psychological safety is being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences or to our self-image. And it's where people feel safe to express their ideas, their opinions, speak their mind. That definitely came out. So having a voice, but also admitting mistakes, and talking about our feelings. And psychological safety ensures that, I guess, acts of vulnerability are rewarded, not punished. That's quite critical. And in short, it's a really, really important foundation to a vibrant, inclusive culture. So quite simply, when leaders neglect it, teams falter. When we nurture it and embrace it, teams flourish. So it's definitely emerging as one of the most prevalent terms in today's workplace. But as we said earlier, it is still fairly new to the workplace. Having said that, it's been around as a terminology since about 1999 when Dr. Amy Edmondson, and we'll hear from her a little bit later on, a video, not in person, we'll hear from her. So she coined the term, in 1999 around her studies. And the reason why it's important is because the brain processes any form of risk as a life or death threat, right? So that's going to trigger our fight, flight, freeze response. And this primal response, of course, keeps us safe in real life threatening situations. But it also occurs in situations where there is a perceived threat. So that can be an emotional threat, a psychological threat to us, to our emotional safety. And those threats in today's society can be really varied. So it might be, someone cuts us up on the road. It might be, someone being unkind or not including us. All of those kind of things can trigger us into this threat response. So a psychologically safe environment is one where we can believe that we can be ourselves, our authentic selves. That definitely came through. And also one where we are prepared to be vulnerable. We're not feeling that risk of that threat. We are prepared to take risks. We are prepared to be vulnerable and be ourselves.
Joe, I was just going to add in there, you mentioned some good examples there around the things that cause it, because it could be someone, you said cutting us up or being rude to us. It could actually just be something that's well-intentioned as well, like giving feedback, might make us feel not safe because we don't like to hear that maybe. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point there is it happens across society. It's not just in the workplace, is it?
No.
Yeah, there will be certain examples that are prevalent in the workplace. And creating that is absolutely creating psychological safety is absolutely foundational to allowing us to feel safe and be ourselves and, like we said, create that vibrant culture. So let's have a look at a little bit more detail. Why is it important in the workplace? Well, um, Google did a study a few years ago now called Project Aristotle, and they had a look at psychological safety, and they identified that psychological safety was the number one determinant of team performance. All right, so that was the output of the study that they did. So it says there as well, teams will be high performing, inclusive, and innovative. So psychological safety is the foundation of high performance in teams and in organizations. It means that teams will be committed, not just compliant, but committed and motivated in our culture. You know, they're prepared to speak out. They have a voice. They're not frightened to say what they think. They're not frightened to express new ideas. And of course, all of that leads to a much more innovative and forward-thinking culture. And it all starts with trust. Trust and psychological safety are very, very closely interwoven. So you really can't talk about one without mentioning the other. So if there's no trust between a worker and their colleague, um, they're not going to feel safe. Without trust, a worker might feel worried that they're going to say the wrong thing, or worried that that's going to have a negative impact on their career. Without trust, they're going to be fearful of speaking up with a new idea or challenging. Um, why do we think, it seems kind of illogical, really, doesn't it? If we think someone's struggling in the workplace, why would they want to stay quiet? And we've kind of mentioned some of those ideas already. Jump on the chat. If we summarize, why would people want to stay quiet? If they're struggling with something, if they don't feel happy in the workplace, what's stopping them? Yeah, it's always the first one that comes to my mind, Debbie, as well. So yeah, fear of judgment, fear of being seen weak. Yeah, and that's almost as kind of society hangover as well, isn't it? Fear of being embarrassed, fear of being seen as a failure, fear of conflict, absolutely. Fear of repercussions or it being held against them. Yeah, fear of speaking, being brave enough to speak out, but then not being heard. Yeah, lack of confidence. There might be a fear of leadership as well. It might be a fear of certain people in authority, and that's quite a key thing to break down some of those barriers to create psychological safety. Yes, a fear of losing opportunities or yeah, repercussions, I guess, again. Absolutely. So how do we overcome this fear? Well, of course it is by creating this psychologically safe environment. But what does that look like? Well, it looks like some of the things you can see on the screen there. So, respect between colleagues, people speaking openly and honestly, open communication, a real sense of belonging, a sense of fairness as well, real empathy. So, a level of emotional intelligence in the workplace, people being able to understand each other, put themselves in other people's shoes, and a real appreciation. Like I said earlier, are we appreciating and rewarding that vulnerability, and people offering to speak up, or are we in a situation where we're punishing it? And as we go through this webinar today, I'd love you to just really reflect. Keep asking yourself, what does that feel like in your organisation? What opportunities might you have? Are some of these present in your organisation? Are there some that aren't, that we might be able to do some things differently for? Okay, so I'm going to launch a quick poll because I'd like to hear from you guys first. And I think this is the right one.
I was going to take them through the 4 stages first, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, I've got that. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to that one. That's different to what's on my
Okay.
on my screen. Okay, cool. So let's go through the 4 stages. Tony will give us an outline of this first, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah, no problem. So yes, there are, as we said, there are four key stages of psychological safety, and this is so important. Joe's already talked about how this is so important, and that study from Google, and I think that's something that it gets lost on people sometimes, just how important this is. Like, this is you know, millions and millions of pounds spent to find out what impacts team performance the most, and they looked at things like experience in the team, different skills in the team, training. And as much as I don't want to put training down, being trainers, like, all of those things paled in comparison to this topic. And so I think it's just a really key one that we remember how much of a difference this makes to people's ability to perform. And that's why we need to focus in these four key areas. So as you can see, these are the four that we're going to look at, and this comes from Timothy Clark's book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. So he's came up with this idea that, you know, we progress through these stages from the top to the bottom there. I mean, personally, I don't believe you have to go in that order. I believe it is a bit more interchangeable than that. But essentially, these are the 4 key areas. So the first one, inclusion safety. So do we feel safe to be ourselves? Do we feel like we're part of the team, and we don't have to change who we are? We feel wanted and appreciated. We don't feel excluded. We don't have to change anything about ourselves, whether that is a protected characteristic like my religion or my sexuality, or just a personality trait like the fact that I'm an extrovert or an introvert, or anything like that. So it's about being safe to be who I am. The second one is all about learner safety. So this is around, can I take the time to learn things at my own pace, asking questions, showing vulnerability when I don't know the answer, not feeling like I have to pretend that I do, but also, can I experiment? Can I make mistakes as I try things? And Kate mentioned earlier, risk taking. Yeah, can I take risks and not be punished for that if it goes wrong? Well, that's a huge part of it there. The third one, contributor safety. So do people feel safe to suggest their own ideas without feeling, open to embarrassment or ridicule? So yeah, can I suggest ideas? Are people gonna listen to them? And then finally, challenger safety. So not only can I suggest ideas, I can challenge when I disagree with an approach, with an idea, with a way of working, whether that is, I want to challenge the status quo about how things are now, or I want to challenge a planned change, whatever that might be. Do I feel safe to make that challenge? So as Joe said, we're going to run a little poll here just to see what I want you to think about is, just from your own perspective for the moment, not your team's, just for yourself, how safe do you feel in each of these 4 areas? So Joe will run the poll. So yeah, there's a little scroll bar on the right of that poll. So there are 4 questions there. So first of all, for inclusion safety, on a scale of 1 to 10, how safe do you feel in terms of inclusion? Then learner, then contributor, then challenger. Should be able to vote and then just scroll down and continue voting on all 4. Okay, let's have a look.
Can everyone see the poll? I'm not seeing any answers come through yet.
Yeah, I can see them. I don't know why I can see them, not you, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
27 of 29 have answered it, so we're nearly there. We'll give it another few seconds and then we'll just close it in case a couple of people are just abstaining. But yeah, you could probably can you see it to close it, Joe, and share it? Or
Yeah.
Go for it. So if you want to share the results, that's great. So yeah, so we're looking at inclusion. So yeah, a couple of sort of medium ones, 8 and 9s mainly. Learners actually very high, but a couple of low ones again. Probably starting to drop a little bit towards on the contributor safety, and then challenger again slightly lower. So probably the last 2 are a bit lower than the others. To be honest, what I've typically seen from sessions I've held in the past is that inclusion safety tends to be the highest, which is not a bad thing at all, that people feel they can be themselves in that way. But the other 3 tend to be a little bit lower. Great that we're not seeing loads of low scores from you. But it'll be interesting later when I get you to think about what do you think your teams are thinking? And this is something I would strongly suggest you do with your teams. We can openly say that we do this in our team meetings. We ask people how they feel in each of these areas, and we tackle each one of them. When one of them scores low, we dive into why that is. And I think that's a really important part of managing a team, really. So yeah, good. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll come back to some more on that later, but you can close that poll down for now if it's blocking your screen. But what we're going to do essentially for the rest of this session, or most of this, is we're now going to go through each of the 4 areas, and we're going to give you some thoughts and some tips on what we can do personally to increase our own psychological safety, but also what we can do to support others in their psychological safety as well.
Yeah, so we're going to start with inclusion safety. And just as Tony said, like in our experience, this tends to be one of the highest scoring areas. And it's, for me, that's not surprising, I guess, because probably, I guess, psychological safety as a terminology, as we said, is fairly kind of new coming into the workplace. But actually, you know, if we think back in the last few years, equality, diversity, and inclusion has kind of elevated as a hot topic. And lots of organizations, certainly in our experiences, you know, have been embracing that topic. So we have done some good work around this area as a society, and you know, the organizations operating within that. So doesn't surprise me that this is one of the highest scoring areas. So inclusion safety is the first stage, and it's kind of that informal acceptance into the team. Can I be my authentic self? So inclusion is a state of being valued, respected, and supported at work. It's about creating an atmosphere where multiple voices can be heard, and everyone feels like they belong. And just like Tony said, we can absolutely be our authentic selves. So let's have a look at what contributes to inclusion safety. And just as Tony sort of alluded to a moment ago, it can, I guess, cross over a lot of different things. So it can be sort of thinking about, do we feel included from a point of view of our protected characteristics? But it's also everything else kind of under the waterline, if you like, on that image there as well. There's lots of obvious traits, and you know, we may be doing some work around that. We may feel included for our more outwardly obvious traits. But what are we doing around the sort of less obvious traits as well? So it could be things like, you know, we all have our own unique mannerisms. Do we feel like we can, you know, express ourselves in the way that we do? You know, and well, are we comfortable to do that? So, you know, maybe a behaviour seems ordinary to me. You know, I'm just being myself. Is someone calling out that as not, you know, not normal? Behavioral preferences, so it could be, you know, levels of expressiveness, for example. It could be levels of assertiveness. Again, we're all different across this space. It's a huge scale, isn't it? Flexibility, some of us love change and, you know, want to get involved in that stuff. Some of us are resistant to change quite naturally, and all of this is okay. That also goes on to our thinking styles, so kind of like things like insights or Myers-Briggs. Gender expression, that might be another one. You know, all of these things contribute to who we are. And neurodiversity as well, that's sort of growing in an area of workplace inclusion, certainly receiving a lot more focus in recent years. So the ranges of different ways our brains function, the way we think differently, the way we perform differently. So if we get this right, we will be including all of these different, and probably more as well, you know, we'll be including all of these different characteristics. And that allows for a really diverse workplace. And what does diversity bring to a workplace? Jump on the chat for me for a second. What does diversity bring? Why is that a benefit? Quite apart from how it makes us feel as individuals, what is a benefit for organizations of diversity? Debbie's, yeah, new ideas, innovation. Yeah. Yeah, so really diverse ideas and opinions that leads to innovation and new ideas. Diverse ways of thinking, diverse personality traits and ways of communicating, all that good stuff. Yeah, brings about really diverse teams.
On that topic, Joe, I just wanted to shout out. There's I highly recommend reading a book called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Said. I've just put it in the chat there. Absolutely brings that home, that benefits of diversity piece. Yeah, and I guess the other thing I wanted to quickly mention without us going over early on is, sorry, Joe, is that I think we said earlier that this area quite often scores highly. I do wonder sometimes if one of the reasons for that is maybe a lot of us aren't in minority groups, so we don't necessarily, like, it'd be interesting if we asked people in minority groups how do they feel, because that last slide that Joe had with all the different areas and whether that is protected or not. I think the key is, yes, we might be empathetic and reactively good towards these different types and respond well in situations where we're confronted by them, but are we being proactive about them? So that's the takeaway for me is, and Joe's going to talk about how to do that I think in a second, but in terms of, are we being proactive about each of these areas and trying to go out of our way to offer that inclusion rather than just waiting for people to come to us? So that's my thoughts. Anyway, Joe, I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's a really good point because, yeah, naturally our feelings are going to vary depending on whether we're in marginalised groups or not for any of these characteristics. So yeah, so what can we do to actively, I guess, bring about this speak up culture? Well, one of the ways we can do it is thinking about allyship. So again, jump on the chat. What can we do to be allies? Do we think? How can we work towards being allies? Listen, yeah, fundamental, isn't it? Yeah, because we can think we're being open and curious. We can be asking questions, but are we really listening to some of the things that aren't being said as well? Really observing behaviours, asking questions, not judging, transparent. Yeah, Gina's saying understanding the meaning of allyship. Absolutely. So non-judgmental, open-minded. Yeah. So allyship is, again, quite a new concept in the workplace, but it's putting ourselves into a place where we are supporting everyone. So even if we're not in some of those marginalized groups, we are being an ally for those people, and we're bringing about a change where it says, it's okay to be ourselves, and making sure that we're speaking up about it. So let's have a look at some of the 4 traits, and a lot of them you've covered there in the chat. Learn, so educating ourselves and understanding the issue. So understanding what it might feel like from somebody else's point of view. So learning about the issues that certain marginalised groups might face, the barriers which they might be facing, and their perspective on what life feels like, for them. And as an ally, I think it's important to recognise we're never going to be able to understand it in exactly the same way as the person with that lived experience will, and that's okay. But what's really important is that we are at least making an effort, and we are looking to listen, looking to empathise. So listening is the second most important thing for allyship, of course. So asking questions, finding out about what your colleagues might want from you as an ally, what support might they need, what help and understanding might they need, and it's okay to ask questions. And I think, again, it's different for different people. Some people are very, very open and want you to ask questions, others less so. So it's about having that empathy as well, and being able to read that emotional intelligence, being able to read the situation. But largely, people would rather you ask questions, and because it shows a willingness to learn and understand. empathy being able to walk a mile in their shoes. And like we said, we're never going to be able to completely understand things the same as the person that has that lived experience. So, you know, I'm never going to completely understand things from Tony's point of view. I try mostly. And vice versa, because of course we're different people. We've got all of those different, you know, characteristics and dynamics playing towards that. But it's suspending your own judgment sometimes, isn't it? And just stepping back and being able to offer that empathy, you know, try and look at things from their perspective. And suspending judgment is important in that. And then the last thing, being an advocate, so standing up and aligning your actions with your words. So it's one thing to, you know, sort of openly say that you're supporting and being an ally, but are your actions mirroring that? You know, do your actions align with that? So being an ally and advocating for people might look like sharing different opportunities with people. It might look like self-reflecting on your own behaviours and different situations. It might be standing up and calling out inappropriate behaviours. So maybe there's some banter that, you know, made somebody feel uncomfortable. Maybe there's some microaggressions that you've heard or overheard. You know, are we, even if the person didn't mean it, are we standing up and correcting those behaviours and calling them out? And a couple of things to reflect on after today's session. Are there any examples of cultural differences in your work environment, either within your teams or across markets, when people are different cultures are working together? So think about what cultural differences are there, and what can you do to build allyship? And that might be as you as an individual, it might be, you know, wider as an organization, maybe starting you know, diversity and inclusion groups or you know, different groups to represent different characteristics. Just have a think, what can you do to build allyship? And then just to conclude on inclusion safety, some questions to ask yourself. Again, for yourselves, and also thinking about your organizations as well. As we said, a speak up culture starts with this foundation of inclusion. So questions on screen: do you disvalue or disregard feedback from a specific group of people, and why? And this links a lot to unconscious bias. And actually, we have done a webinar on that in the past. We were talking about this earlier. So if you want to kind of go and test yourselves on that a little bit, then there is a webinar recording available on our website. But, you know, is there, you know, often unintentional. We're not saying it's intentional at all, but calling out, you know, looking at whether people stay quiet in a meeting, who's staying quiet and why. Is there anyone in your teams or the wider organization getting excluded for any reason? Who do you know least? All right, are there people who you aren't that familiar with? You know, go and explore that, go and get to know them a little bit better, learn and widen your knowledge base. And who has to make the most compromises on your team? Is anyone having to compromise? Is anyone having to not? And when we say compromise, I think it's about compromising yourself, not being able to be yourself, and think about why that might be. So this will help determine whether we're stifling innovation and reducing kind of the level of how people feel included.
Great, thanks, Jo. So yeah, that's our inclusion safety. And there's a question about the slides. Yes, those questions that you saw on the slide. If anyone wants a copy of the slides, let us know. But the whole recording will be saved on the website anyway, so you can grab it from there. So from a learner safety point of view, as we said, this is about allowing people the chance to learn, ask questions, take the time they need, but also to try things out. Take a chance, risk take. Otherwise, how are we ever going to move forwards and grow and develop new ideas and push the business forwards if we don't allow people to try new things? We just want to do the same old safe things. So risk taking, experimenting, and making mistakes. You know, letting them make a mistake and not be worried about any reprisal for that. So that's what this is all about. And just to give you first off bit of an understanding of why this matters so much. We're going to play a video from Amy Cuddy, who, as Joe mentioned, is sort of like the what's the word the queen of psychological safety. You like really coined the term in the first place, has driven everything forward in this space. So there's a short video we're going to play that explains some of this.
It's Amy Edmondson, isn't it? This one. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, not Amy Cuddy. Amy
Body
Edmondson, sorry.
body language.
Amy Cuddy's body language. Amy Edmondson, sorry.
Yeah, I always get them confused as well.
There are some workplaces where people absolutely wake up in the morning, if not eager, at least willing and ready to take the interpersonal risks of learning. I call these special workplaces ones that have psychological safety. Now, I'll define psychological safety as a belief that it's absolutely okay, in fact, it's expected, to speak up with concerns, with questions, with ideas, with mistakes. And I got into this, I got interested in this actually quite by accident. Let me tell you how it happened. I joined a team of mostly physicians, nurses, and the job of that team was to find out, to assess, they hoped conclusively, what the actual rate of medication errors was in, let's say, some modern tertiary care hospitals. So their job was to set out to collect data on drug errors, human-related drug errors. My little part was very simple. I was going to ask the question and answer the question of, do better teams, better hospital patient care teams, make fewer mistakes? I used a standard team survey measure to assess the team effectiveness, and trained nurse investigators visited a number of units in 2 hospitals every couple of days for 6 months. These were the data that they came up with. Now, these are adverse drug events, errors, just call them medication errors, that were deemed to be based on human error, expressed in terms of errors per 1,000 patient days. Now, here's where the story gets a little weird. I got the data, I waited patiently, I got the data on the teams, I got the data on the errors, and I ran my analyses. And what did I find? The results were exactly the opposite of what I had expected. It appeared that better teams were making more mistakes, not fewer. Now, from the point of view of a young researcher wanting to publish a paper, this was a real problem. Never mind the other problems, right? And so this was a problem. No, this was a puzzle. So I sat down to think, why else might? I thought about the need for coordination between physicians and nurses. I thought about the need for teamwork on the fly, for speaking up, for double checking. And I thought maybe, in a kind of blinding flash of the obvious, I thought maybe the better teams aren't making more mistakes. Maybe they're more willing to discuss them. What if the better teams have a climate of openness that allows them to report and even get to the bottom of these things? Now, having that insight was a far cry from proving it. So what did I do? I sent out a young research assistant to study these units very carefully. He had to have no preconceptions. He didn't know the error rates. He didn't know how they scored on the team survey. He didn't even know my hypothesis. And I said, what do you learn? And you know what he found? He found that these units, these 8 units, were wildly different in terms of whether they were willing and able and did, in fact, talk about errors. Some of them were actually actively talking about them all the time and in the process of trying together to work together to find new ways of reducing them. I called this, much later, I called this psychological safety. Now, you might want to know, what was the sorting rule in this chart? It looked at first like I was trying to get it from highest error rate to lowest, and I just am not very good at math and got mixed up in the middle. No. These are sorted by the research assistant's ratings of the openness of the climate. As you can see, the correlation is very high indeed.
So you can obviously get a feel for that, and obviously that's just one example of where learner safety comes in. But that idea of being able to make a mistake and talk about it. If we can't talk about it, then obviously the risk is huge because we can't share it, we can't learn from it, and as a team, no one else can learn from it. So it's so important that we have that level of confidence in being able to admit mistakes, to ask questions. And I love that video as a way of showcasing that. So, well, how do we make it okay? Well, one of the in fact, let me ask a quick question on the chat. How can you make it okay? We'll come to growth mindset in a minute, but how can we make it okay for people to ask questions and make mistakes? What do we need to do? Share in the chat. How do you allow people to have that learner safety and ask questions and make mistakes? Go first. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we can lead. Absolutely. Lead by example. Errors are welcome. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look, it's a learning process. Allow them. Yeah. Not having a blame culture. Tara, I think that's a massive one that Tara's talking about there. Vulnerability. Share your mistakes. Call out when you screw up, and it gives other people permission to do it. Greg, yeah, flat hierarchy. We talked about that early on about the danger of having people that are seen as more senior. Actually, a flat hierarchy structure can certainly allow some of that confidence as well. Positive failing, yes, showing where the benefits come from as well. Yeah, being open and discussing mistake moments. Absolutely. It's something I know I've personally tried to work on. I mean, some of the things I've thought about when how we can do this. I mean, first off, think about how you react when someone does make a mistake. What is your instant reaction? Does your chimp brain come out and start, reacting negatively? And even if you think you manage it well, what's your body language showing? Because that's what people really believe. So that's a big part of it. Secondly, this is really tough, but thank people when they tell you about their mistake. I know it's difficult. Someone's just come to you with a mistake that's potentially going to cause you more work, but thank them for telling you about it, because it's a chance to fix it. You don't want them not telling you next time, so thank them. And don't try to be perfect. So to Gina's point there, if you try to be perfect, even if you react positively in those situations, everyone else will think, well, actually, the leader, the boss, or the whoever is perfection. They never make mistakes, so I can't. So it's okay to show vulnerability and have those mistake moments, if you like, and learn from them. Absolutely, learning from experience. So that's a big part of it. So that's as for me, if you're trying to lead it, that's one of the big things. Another part, as you can see on the screen here, is about growth mindset, and this is trying to develop it in yourself and others, really. So trying not to be worried about those situations, not worry about how am I going to appear in those situations. I won't ask the question because I don't want to look stupid, or I won't take a chance, I won't risk take because, again, I don't want to fail. And again, I love that piece there in terms of dealing with setbacks. It's not about identity, it's about action. It's about, I did fail this time, it doesn't make me a failure. And as Greg said, it's about learning from it, or Debbie saying the same, about learning from it. It's an opportunity to right a wrong or learn from a situation. So can we embrace those challenges? Can we learn from others? Can we ask for feedback? Not just, we talk about ignoring constructive criticism being a fixed mindset, whereas a growth mindset is about actively seeking it. It's not just accepting criticism, it's asking for it. And what can I learn? How much more can I grow? It's about having that sort of mindset. So having a growth mindset, encouraging in others, and allowing people, not even allowing people to make mistakes, like encouraging them to try things and that they will learn from it is a huge part of it. So a couple of wrap up things for this section for learner safety to think about. Do you have that growth mindset yourself? Is that you? Are you someone that goes out your way to grow and step outside your comfort zone? And if not, what can you do to push more in that? Do you commit to having a say? I was reflecting on this the other day about a place I used to work where I didn't feel I had the confidence to suggest ideas, and I used to hold loads of ideas back around admitting mistakes or asking questions because I was worried about it. So do you feel safe to experiment and take chances? Can you admit when you've made a mistake? Do you feel comfortable, even if you think it's a silly question? And for me, that's all about us. But then the other part as well. Do you encourage others to ask questions? And genuinely, not just like, oh, anyone got any questions? Like, drag it out of people. Get them to know that it's okay to ask questions, and make sure they do understand and that it's okay to do that. And yeah, as I said earlier, do you thank others? Not just allow them. Do you thank people for admitting mistakes, for the culture that creates, even when it does cause you extra work or stress? So just some things to reflect on going forwards. go.
Yeah, and I always think one of the ways to sort of encourage people to admit their mistakes and is that vulnerability piece. Like, make mistakes yourself, be human yourself, and that will encourage people around you to be able to do that as well. Okay, so the third area of our 4 areas is contributor safety. So this is about, can I create value? And it's where individuals feel like they can fully participate. They can get involved. They can say what they think. They've earned the right for autonomy based on how they're performing. So one of the best ways to generate contributor safety is to get team members to think beyond their individual roles. So if they are confined by what their individual role is contributing, then that's reducing the environment down. So a great way to get contributor safety out there is getting people to think beyond their normal sphere of influence. So crossing into other people's roles and contributing those ideas, helping each other. And one of the things that's needed for that is clear autonomy. So are we creating a culture that discourages autonomy and enables micromanagement, in which case levels of stress are going to be high? Or are we creating a culture and environment where leaders are loosening the reins and, voices are heard, people are encouraged to have the autonomy to do things how they see fit, or have the autonomy to suggest different things? Okay, so what does that look like in your environment? I think the other thing for me that's really important to contribute to safety is listening, right? Does everyone have a voice, and are we celebrating that? Okay, so there's some examples here of how might you ensure everyone has a voice in a meeting. There's creative ways to do that, but enabling people's voices, celebrating when people do speak up is going to tackle some of that lack of psychological safety. It's going to make it okay, and that lack of sort of confidence in doing so. And with that, of course, we're going to get better ideas, better innovation, and we're going to build that contributor safety. So things like round robins, things like catching up with people individually if they're not extroverts and might not want to say things in the meeting. Can we get their ideas beforehand? Post-it notes make it a little bit easier for some people sometimes. And sometimes you might want to kind of go in first and make it okay, make it, show your own vulnerability. Sometimes you might need to wait till last. Let everyone else have. Don't sort of predetermine the outcome of a question, of a conversation, by giving your experience first. Let everyone else talk openly. Otherwise, you risk kind of swaying their thoughts and their ideas and limiting that contribution. So again, a couple of ideas, a couple of questions there on the screen that you can see, and you're welcome to screenshot these as we go through, that will help you consider what contributor safety looks like for you and for others. Can you be genuinely happy for the success of others? If someone says a really good idea, how do you feel about that? Or maybe you were thinking about that good idea and you didn't, you held it back, but then somebody else was brave enough to say it. How do you feel about that? Are you empowering others without micromanaging them? Are you, really giving that autonomy, freely sharing experiences and knowledge and skills? And are you happy to speak your mind? I think, we can't always control, we can't always influence how other people feel and think, but we can influence ourselves. So if we start with ourselves, that's a really powerful platform. Okay, over to you, Tony. Last one.
Yeah, so the fourth and final one is around challenger safety, and this is about, can I be candid about change? Can I challenge the status quo without feeling like I'm going to be, my position is going to be damaged, or my reputation, or my opportunity to grow in the business, or whatever it might be? Can I challenge the leadership team or the approach or whatever it might be? And whether that is about the status quo and us looking to move forwards, or whether it is I want to challenge something we're about to do and I think we shouldn't do it, whatever it might be. Do we ask? Does your team ask the question, why are we doing it in this way? What if we tried this instead? If you're not being asked those questions, then I would just say why and ask yourself that. The danger is, especially as leaders in businesses, it's very quite often deep down we want people to go along with what we say because we get our way, but really that's not the best thing for the growth of the business, because we don't get all the best ideas from people. So actually it's very easy for us to go, oh good, I've got that through, without anyone challenging it, rather than embracing that challenge and asking for that challenge. We should be saying to people, not only is it okay for you to challenge, not only is it expected, it's your job. Like, it's part of your job to challenge these ideas. And if we create that mindset where it's respectfully done in the team and you've got this healthy conflict, that's a big part of it. So how can we do that? Well, it's a few things we can think about. Take it in turns. So take turns to host meetings and lead the ideas. Take turns to challenge as well. Go around the room and ask people's opinion. Do have training that is led by different people across the team, even the less experienced ones, that showcase their areas, if you like, that allows everyone to be challenged. It shows that everyone is valued and has an opinion, a worthy opinion. As we've covered a couple of times, try and have a bit more of a flat structure when it comes to ideas. Remove that, take that hierarchy out of it. A good idea is a good idea no matter who says it. So take that superiority away from it, and protect people's right to speak up. Stand up for other people. If they're shouted down, stand up for them. Try and remove that emotional cost for challenging. So think about how we can make people feel a bit safer in doing it, and show sensitivity to people. If you have to turn down people's ideas or challenges, do it in a way that is respectful, and still thank them for the idea, for the challenge, but just explain why we can't go with that approach, or why we have to do it the way that was planned. So just show sensitivity if we are turning people down. These are things we can do. The other thing we can think about is how we do things, because this is a big blocker that stops people challenging. Is they're worried it's going to come across as bullish or rude. Actually, it's not. It's about how you challenge that's important. So just be aware, like this whole assertiveness model here that looks at, are you focused on the outcome, the goal, or are you focused on the person? So if we're heavily focused on the goal and to the detriment of people, we might come across as aggressive. And so therefore that's what we are actually worried about, is we become overly that's not being assertive, that's being aggressive. Passive is about, we're so worried about people's feelings that we won't challenge and say what we think, and then we're too quiet, if you like. Assertive is that fine balance of being respectful, having empathy for other people's positions, but pushing our viewpoint forwards in a respectful way. So just being aware of that balance between what we're trying to achieve, what we think is right, and the person. It's that healthy balance to avoid being aggressive or passive. That's where we want to be, in that assertive zone, and that allows us to challenge respectfully. So a few things to think about from a challenger safety perspective. Do you allow and encourage people to challenge you? Again, I've said this thank one's been on the last 3. This is such an important one for me. What I always say, what you reward, you will see more of. So if you thank people for doing things, other people will see you thanking them, and they will do that behavior. So if someone challenges you and you say, thank you for challenging me, that's a really good idea because it's made us explore this topic, other people are going to see you doing that and want to challenge you as well. So even if it's something that goes against you, thank people for their challenge and for being brave enough to do it, and avoid being defensive, because you shouldn't take it personally. Accepting a high level of candor. We want that honesty, that transparency, encouraging questions, and also being brave ourselves and challenging the status quo ourselves. So these are all things we can do for ourselves and for others. Thanks, Ken. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Of course, we could spend a whole day on psychological safety, but these are the 4 key areas. And as I said at the start, one of the things I would really recommend you do is explore where is it across your team that your opportunities exist. So, I mean, we'll very quickly do it, but we'll spend 1 minute on it. Joe's going to bring up a poll and I'll explain why we're doing it. This time I want you to just assess, where do you think your team are in the 4 areas? And we'll only give you 1 minute to answer this because we're a bit behind on time, of course. But yeah, in terms of those 4 areas, where do you think your team are in terms of inclusion, learner safety, contributor, and challenger safety? And while you're answering that, I'll just hopefully you can see the poll. I haven't seen anyone answer yet, but yeah, we're coming through now. Yes, I would strongly advise you having conversations, doing anonymous polls or whatever you want to do in your team, because if you focus on these areas, there'll be one that is an opportunity, I'm sure, at least, and just go after it, because you want to really encourage safety in all 4 of these areas. So you're reflecting at the moment. I can see some answers coming through, but even if you don't do it now, even if you just go away and take this away, it's definitely one to consider. And yeah, of course, you can do your guess, which is what we're doing now. We can guess where our team are and start trying to take action, or even better, we can go and ask them and find out. And if you feel like the psychological safety is really low and they won't be honest about those answers, really important you do that in an anonymous way. Because if they're not psychologically safe in the first place, they might not be honest about where they are. So create that safety by doing anonymous surveys if you need to. Joe, I'll just let you share where we got to. Apologies if you didn't get a chance to finish, but we are a bit behind on time. So it looks like slightly lower scores than earlier, I would say. Yeah, definitely some lower scores than earlier in terms of our teams. So just one to take away and have a think about, especially on the challenger and contributor safety. Again, the biggest areas for opportunity. So, all right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Joe's going to finish up with just a couple of top tips on culture.
Yeah, so again, maybe a few ideas for you to take back to your teams and to your workplaces. How do we think about creating a psychologically safe culture? So yes, we've got those 4 areas that we can look at. Another way, a really simple way of considering it, is something that we talk a lot about in our sessions and team effectiveness sessions that we do with organizations, and we call it leading with faith. So 4 key areas that you might want to quite nicely create an action plan around. It's very, very simple to do, and you can work with your teams to do this. And in the background, you might want to sort of spend a bit more of a deeper dive time going into those 4 stages that we talked about earlier. But leading with faith is a really simple way to affect culture. And what does it mean? So flexibility might be introducing some ideas and ways of working into the team. So such as, flexible working hours and shift patterns. Do people feel like they can say, I've got this appointment to go to? Do they feel like they can, balance, genuinely balance home and work duties? What's their travel like? All of that kind of stuff. But it can also be flexibility in being able to understand, being able to contribute in terms of their personality styles, and whether that's understood in the environment. It could be flexibility around downtime, and like certain things will take a lot of energy for me to do, and they might not take as much energy for Tony to do. So understanding that, and recognizing that I might have only done 2 hours, but actually that's emotionally that's drained me, and I need to kind of switch off for a little bit to be effective again. Authenticity, that ties in obviously to a lot of what we've said. So being true to yourself, being human, showing the real you will really emphasize the ability for your team to do that. Connection, so exploring how do people really get to know each other? How do we bring that connection to life? How often are we meeting? How often are we just maybe just pinging someone on Teams and starting a phone call over a coffee and saying, how are you doing? How are we really getting under the skin of how our teams are connecting and getting on with each other? And encouragement, that thank you for, when people are challenging, are we proactively giving them feedback? Are we encouraging them to try new things? So it can be a really simple and very quick, effective way to create an action plan, to start to build psychological safety, I guess, whilst you do a little bit more of that deeper dive into those 4 stages. Couple of strategies there just to finish this up. You can see on the screen, and you will have your own strategies, I'm sure, by all means that you will be using. But employee surveys, of course, training and coaching for managers. Do they understand what psychological safety is? Employee wellbeing strategies, DIA programs, mental health first aiders can be really useful as well to support psychological safety, encouraging that openness. Open forums and suggestion boards, bringing about that contributor safety, and of course celebration. So that encouragement piece there. So lots you can be doing, and it's a bit of a whistle stop tour in an hour's webinar always.
Yeah. But yeah, here's our top takeaways anyway. You've probably got your own, but our top ones. So first of all, recognize those signs. What does a psychologically safe environment look like? Because that will be a big indicator of whether you're achieving it or not. So have a look back on those early slides about what good looks like. And again, like I say, ask your team. That's another easy way to find out. Ask them where they are on these 4 areas. Think about respecting each individual and be proactive about that is the key thing there on inclusion and safety. In terms of learner safety, have that growth mindset yourself to explore, but also show vulnerability yourself and allow other people the space to make mistakes and to ask questions. In terms of contributor safety, making sure everyone is heard. So, you know, does everyone's voice carry the same weight regardless of their role in the organization? And do we allow that flexibility, as Joe's talked about with FACE there, for communication preferences to play through? Encouraging people to speak up and challenge as well. And as I said earlier, what you say thank you for, you will see more of. So reward that. So whether that's admitting mistakes, whether that's suggesting ideas, where it's challenging you, just say thank you and reward them for it, and you'll see more of it. And yeah, use those 4 elements of FACE: flexibility, authenticity, connection, and encouragement to create the right culture. So hopefully you've got a few ideas from today's session. The recording will be on the website. So go and grab that there. I've seen a couple of requests for slides. That's no problem. But thank you very much. If there's any final questions, feel free to chuck in the chat. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, have a great day.